Hello and welcome again to this edition of Capitol Dateline. I'm your host, Brad Swanson. We are coming to you this final week, allegedly, of the legislative session from inside Florida's Capitol. Once again, I'm joined by Jim Saunders, the executive editor of the News Service of Florida, to tell us what's happened in the last 48 hours and possibly what's going to happen in the next 48 business hours of the legislature. Jim, welcome.
Thanks.
All right, so we're here. Allegedly, today was supposed to be the last day.
Using the word allegedly.
Right. Okay, because it's not, right? And we're at Cinco de Mayo, so that's a positive. All right, so let's start with the budget. That was the biggest controversy of knowing when that will be laid on the desk. Where does the budget stand? What's in it? What's not?
Well, Senate Appropriations Chairman Jack Latvala said on the floor last night about quit bugging me about budget items because it's being printed. Can't do any more for you. So we're expecting that Friday, sometime probably midday, later in the afternoon, we will actually see the budget. And as we've discussed before, they've had to go into overtime because they didn't get it done by Tuesday. The anticipation at this point is that they'll come back on Monday and vote the budget out. It's going to be in the ballpark of $83 billion. We're not sure right now until we see the actual version of the real version of it, what that number will be, but it'll be in that range. Okay. So, the final issues they really had to work out were a lot of health care issues. There's more than $500 million in Medicaid cuts to the hospitals, and one of the issues was how those cuts to get distributed amongst the hospitals, which is always something they have to deal with, seems like every year, in terms of where the money goes.
Yeah. All right, so now the budget is getting printed. That issue, for all intents and purposes, is off the table until it goes to the governor for him to veto or a line item or what have you.
Right. I mean, there's a lot of speculation around here what the governor's going to do with this, because really the budget doesn't have what he wanted, and he's been out this week as the legislature's been sort of slogging through these final days. He's been out literally traveling the state talking about his legislative priorities, including his budget priorities for Enterprise Florida and Visit Florida, which the legislature basically didn't go along with hardly at all. So there's a lot of speculation about whether he would veto the entire budget, just veto large portions of the budget. He also could exact some revenge with individual bills that are priorities of the House Speaker, Senate President, or other leaders. So we're not really sure what he's going to do at this point. We had a piece yesterday that said the last time that a governor had vetoed the full budget was in 1992 when Lawton Childs did it. So it's a rare thing when a governor vetoes an entire budget. But the governor clearly is unhappy. He didn't get his priorities, and he's been very public for literally months that this is what he wanted, and he didn't get it.
Yeah. Well, this is the phase of the process that those actions always come out, and it's the checks and balances that are taking place right now. Okay, so let's move on to some of the signature issues, everything from marijuana to guns to workers' comp and a million different insurance issues. Where do we stand on all of that?
Well, a lot of it's still up in the air going into the final hours of the session as we stand here right now. Medical marijuana, the House and the Senate still have not reached agreement, again, as we stand here right now, on final language of that bill. The Senate refused or went with a different version than what the House did. So now it's going to kick back to the House, and we'll see what the House does. I think there's a lot of people who think they need to pass something to give some direction to the Department of Health of how to carry out the constitutional amendment on medical marijuana. I think a lot of legislators would like to pass something, but that's still up in the air. That's a big one. Another issue that's kind of reemerged, it's been sort of interesting, is the stand your ground issue, which early on in session, the Senate passed a bill that it shifts a burden of proof in stand your ground cases. But this has been something that the NRA has wanted, a lot of other gun rights groups and have lobbied for. And the House and Senate still have different versions of that bill going into the final day of session. And it involves a legal point within the bill. But this is something that you kind of think the Republican-dominated legislature could work out, and it may work out in the final hours. But that's still up in the air, which is sort of interesting. It's kind of gotten lost during the course of session, but it reemerged again on Thursday.
Yeah, I would say it looks like for most insurance, those invested in the outcomes of the insurance bills on both sides. I mean, you've just sort of seen a funk fall upon them over the last 3 days because the traction isn't going in either direction. So no one's celebrating.
Well, I think there were two really major insurance issues coming into session. One is workers' comp, and one is what's called assignment of benefits, which deals with property insurance claims. And assignment of benefits, at least as we stand here right now, it's not moving at all. So it looks like it's probably dead. The workers' comp bill, the Senate has not taken it up this week. We're going into Friday without the Senate taking it up, and their bill's probably going to be different than what the House wanted. Whether there's time to reach agreement on that, I don't know. But even business community and trial bar is not in favor of some of the things that are being talked about at this point. But there's a lot of pressure from the business community to do something on workers' comp to try to hold down rates, and it looks like it could be a last-minute thing to see if anything can get done. One other insurance issue that's been out there and gotten some attention this session is repealing the no-fault PIP system. Again, that has moved through the House, but the Senate has not taken up in this final week, so I tend to think that one, we're not hearing much about it, so I tend to think that one is probably dead as well.
Yeah, so on insurance issues, the historical case is if nothing happens, then the pressure builds across the state amongst the folks that are buying it.
Well, and I had a business lobbyist tell me the other day that, passing nothing is better than passing a bad bill. Even though that will lead to, passing nothing would lead to increases in rates, it would start ratcheting up more pressure on the legislature to do something in the future. Now, there'd be short-term pain for employers, but on the other hand, it could lead to next year, real workers' comp bill getting through here.
Right. So what other issues are we looking at in the Capitol that are on either their last legs, life support, or look like they're going to make it across the finish line today?
Well, one of the things that the House leadership has been talking about for a few years actually is trying to deregulate a lot of the healthcare industry, and that does not appear to have much legs in the Senate at this point. One example is repealing the certificate of need process for new hospitals. That's passed the House, but we have not seen it emerge in the Senate. So there's some issues like that look like they're in deep trouble. There's, there are literally dozens of bills in play going into these final hours of session, as there always is at the end of session. One issue to watch is, which also might play out during the budget process over the next few days, is about school testing. There's a lot of there's a bill that the Senate has taken up yesterday that deals with a lot of school testing issues. And there's some disagreements with the House, but there is stuff that both want. So that may be one to watch over the next few days to see how that gets resolved, some K-12 types of issues.
Well, the tenets of the economy always have major bills, and those are the ones that typically will come up at the end of the legislative session today, but there's always those surprises. So we'll encourage our viewers to look to your news feed to see what those surprises are and when, and I'm sure we'll be with you next week to see the fallout of the end of session. So Jim, thank you very much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. That's all the time we have for today's show. Thanks for tuning in to Capitol Dateline. I'm your host, Brad Swanson, coming to you from inside the Capitol. In the meantime, connect with us on our Facebook page at Capitol Dateline Online, or hit us up on our Twitter feed at the FCTA. Thanks for tuning in.